A single red balloon bobbing against the backdrop of a bombed-out building. It was 2013 Aleppo. This wasn't a child's birthday party, it was a symbol of defiance, a flicker of hope amidst the rubble of a city torn apart by war. The image, captured by a photographer, resonated globally. It encapsulated the Syrian conflict, the innocence lost, the resilience of the human spirit, and the stark reality of a nation at war with itself. This conflict, sparked in 2011, has become a defining geopolitical event of our times. It has reshaped the Middle East, fueled a global refugee crisis, and spawned the rise of extremist groups. Understanding its complexities is vital to grasping the current state of global affairs. The Arab Spring, a wave of pro-democracy protests that swept across the Middle East and North Africa in 2011, provided the initial spark for the Syrian uprising. In March 2011, a group of teenagers in the southern city of Daraa, inspired by events in Tunisia and Egypt, spray-painted anti-government graffiti on a school wall. Their arrest and alleged torture sparked local protests. The government responded with brutal force, further inflaming public anger. What began as calls for democratic reforms quickly escalated into demands for the removal of President Bashar al-Assad. The Syrian government's brutal crackdown on peaceful protests fueled the flames of dissent. People from all walks of life, inspired by the hope of a democratic future, joined the protests. The situation quickly spiraled out of control, transforming from peaceful demonstrations into armed rebellion. As government forces intensified their crackdown, protesters began to take up arms in self-defense. The Free Syrian Army, FSA, composed largely of defected Syrian soldiers, emerged as the primary opposition force. Syria, once a relatively stable nation, descended into a full-blown civil war. The conflict quickly drew in regional and international actors. Iran and Russia backed the Assad regime, while countries like the United States, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia supported various opposition groups. This external involvement transformed the Syrian conflict into a proxy war, further complicating an already volatile situation. The war escalated at an alarming rate, with indiscriminate bombing, civilian casualties, and widespread human rights abuses becoming commonplace. The conflict led to the displacement of millions of Syrians, both internally and across international borders. The chaos and instability of the Syrian war created a fertile ground for the rise of extremist groups. In 2014, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, seized large swaths of territory in eastern Syria and western Iraq, declaring a caliphate and imposing its brutal ideology on the local population. ISIS quickly gained notoriety for its horrific human rights abuses, including mass killings, beheadings, and sexual enslavement. The group's propaganda, disseminated online, attracted foreign fighters from across the globe. This further internationalized the conflict and presented a new layer of complexity for the international community. The rise of ISIS shifted the focus of the Syrian conflict. The international community, alarmed by the group's brutality and territorial gains, launched a concerted effort to combat ISIS, further complicating the already multifaceted Syrian conflict. The Syrian conflict became a stage for global power play, with regional and international actors pursuing their own strategic interests. Russia's military intervention in 2015, at the request of the Assad regime, proved to be a turning point. Russian air power, combined with Iranian-backed militias, helped the Syrian government regain control over key areas. The US, while supporting certain rebel groups, primarily focused on combating ISIS, leading to a complex and often contradictory dynamic on the ground. The involvement of external powers deepened the conflict's complexities and fueled proxy wars, with different factions receiving support from various international actors. This intervention had devastating consequences for the Syrian people, caught in the crossfire of a global power struggle. The Syrian conflict triggered the largest refugee crisis since World War II. Millions of Syrians fled their homes, seeking safety in neighboring countries like Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey, as well as in Europe and beyond. These refugees faced perilous journeys, often enduring dangerous sea crossings and exploitative smuggling networks. The mass displacement of people strained resources in host countries and ignited political and social tensions in Europe, fueling anti-immigrant sentiment and challenging traditional notions of humanitarian aid and asylum. The refugee crisis, a direct consequence of the Syrian conflict, highlighted the global impact of the war and presented a significant challenge for the international community. The plight of Syrian refugees continues to be a pressing humanitarian issue, demanding a sustained global response. Beyond the geopolitical maneuvering and military strategies, the Syrian conflict is ultimately a human tragedy. The stories of ordinary Syrians caught in the crossfire offer a glimpse into the war's devastating impact on individuals and communities. There is the story of Amina, a young mother forced to flee her home in Aleppo with her 3 children, leaving behind everything she knew. There is the story of Omar, a doctor working tirelessly in a makeshift hospital, struggling to save lives amidst constant shelling and shortages of essential supplies. These are just 2 of millions of stories of loss, displacement, resilience, and hope. The human cost of the war is immeasurable, marked by physical and psychological scars that will take generations to heal. It is through these personal stories that we can truly grasp the depth of the Syrian tragedy. After more than a decade of war, Syria is a nation in ruins. The conflict has devastated its infrastructure, crippled its economy, and fractured its social fabric. Large swaths of the country remain under the control of various armed groups, and the Assad regime, despite its military victories, faces significant challenges in rebuilding and reasserting its authority. The humanitarian situation remains dire, with millions of Syrians dependent on aid for survival. The country faces a daunting task of reconstruction, reconciliation, and healing. The scars of the conflict run deep, and the path to a peaceful and stable future remains uncertain. The Syrian conflict, despite its complexities and seemingly intractable nature, demands continued attention and a concerted effort from the international community. Predicting the future of Syria remains a complex and challenging task. Several scenarios are possible, each with its own set of implications for the region and the world. One possibility is a continuation of the status quo, with the Assad regime maintaining its grip on power, supported by its allies but facing ongoing instability and resistance in certain areas. Another scenario involves a negotiated political settlement, leading to a power-sharing agreement and a gradual transition towards a more inclusive government. However, achieving such a settlement would require significant concessions from all sides and a willingness to compromise. A third possibility is a further fragmentation of Syria, with different regions controlled by various factions, leading to a protracted state of instability and potential for renewed conflict. Each scenario carries its own set of challenges and opportunities. The future of Syria will depend on the choices made by both internal and external actors, and their willingness to prioritize peace and stability over narrow interests. The image of the red balloon amidst the ruins of Aleppo serves as a poignant reminder of the human cost of the Syrian conflict. It speaks to the resilience of the Syrian people, their enduring hope for a better future, and the need for the international community to remain engaged in seeking a peaceful resolution to this devastating conflict. The Syrian conflict, though complex and multifaceted, demands our attention and understanding. It is a stark reminder of the fragility of peace, the devastating consequences of political violence, and the imperative to prioritize human dignity and well-being in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. The echoes of that child's red balloon continue to resonate, urging us to strive for a world where such symbols of defiance are no longer necessary.